Hello everyone, bringing you the second video today looking at this 1927 Afghan equipment, obviously a product of the Mills Equipment Company. In the first part of this two-part series we looked at the equipment on the mannequin as we have it here. In this video we're going to have a look at all of the various components in more detail, and that's what we're going to get into now.
So the first things we'll have a look at in more detail are the two cartridge carriers, the back section of the belt and the bayonet frog. I've left these all connected together. There's nothing really lost in looking at them all connected together. In fact, it's easier to see how the back piece of the belt and the two cartridge carriers function this way, and there's nothing really lost in looking at the bayonet frog still attached to the belt. The first thing we'll have a look at is the right-hand cartridge carrier. Now I've loaded the top pocket of this with 3 charges of .303 ammunition. Now these press studs are tight, so be as delicate as I can with that. The stamps on these are found under the flap, so you have MECo 1927 there, and as you can see there are 3 charges of .303 ammunition in there, and I'll remove these to make it a little bit easier to look at the rest of the web equipment without the weight in there. We've got a round come adrift from that charger there. There we go. Put those to one side. So as you can see, these easily take 3 charges of .303 ammunition, and there's a better view of the stamp there. The pockets are identical in terms of carrying capacity. These are very tight, these press studs, suggesting they've not been used very much. You can see the lower 3 are all woven onto one piece of webbing there, and then if we look at the back here, the top pocket is stitched in place at the top, as you can see. We have an elongated version of the Mills hook and loop buckle, and obviously the corresponding female section of this on the other side, which we'll have a look at in a moment. And you can see here where the braces attach, you have a small metal loop here, which takes this metal joining piece riveted in place, and then a small webbing shape which then attaches to this buckle here. So a lot of flexibility in that part of the webbing there, the way this attaches. So that's fairly unique to this, well, this and the 1925 pattern web equipment as far as I'm aware. You have a large section of webbing to attach this onto the top of the cartridge carrier there, as you can see. We'll have a look at the other side here. This is a mirror image other than the buckle and also the press studs for attaching a bayonet frog. So you can see that there again stamped underneath the flap there, as you can see. MECo 1927. At the back here you can see the construction is the same as you would expect. And we have that female section of the elongated Mills hook and loop buckle there. And then at the back here you have a single press stud on the cartridge carrier, and as discussed in part 1, this would originally be to take a 1925 pattern type bayonet frog which has a corresponding female press stud on the bayonet frog, which means you can clip it in place on the belt or right up on the cartridge carrier here and it won't slide around. There's a corresponding press stud on the back part of the belt here, and there's actually one hidden away underneath as well. Have a look at the back section of the belt now. Have a look at that from the back here. If I just slide the bayonet frog out of the way, you can see we have the back section of the male part of the press stud there, and then there's another one just here on the back section of the belt as well. This attaches to the cartridge carrier with C hooks at the end here, as you can see, and then the loose end is just held in place with this belt loop here, and the same is true on the other side. You have the C hooks on the end of the cartridge carrier there, and then the loose end just held in place with a belt loop. And this is typical of the 1925 pattern equipment as well. It's quite a common feature of interwar Mills web equipment sets that the cartridge carriers form the front of the belt. You have a back piece. If you want to wear this as a belt, there are 2 sections that can be worn at the front. I've made a video looking at the 1919, well, I've made a video looking at various patterns of belt, and the 1919 pattern belt looked at there and the 1925 pattern belt looked at there both have front sections to make one belt. Obviously when you're using cartridge carriers, the front sections of the belt are replaced with the cartridge carriers, so the set of equipment forms its own belt with the cartridge carriers, more akin to US practice in that regard. So that's the cartridge carriers and belt there. Obviously again marked MECo 1927 on the inner face of the belt, and you'll notice the belt does also have the pockets which would be typical of Mills equipment. Obviously these are to allow for the C hooks to be adjusted, so the size of the belt is adjusted by moving the cartridge carriers in and out on the back section of the belt. This is the bayonet frog which came with this set, and we'll have a look at this in more detail now. MECo 1927 again. The belt loop in it seems to be sized for this 2-inch width of belt, so from that point of view it seems to marry up as well. However, other sets I've seen of this equipment have the 1925 pattern frog already mentioned, with a female press stud to allow it to be fixed in place on the belt. This doesn't have that, of course. It's essentially an elongated version of the 1908 pattern bayonet frog, and it does hang very low from the belt, as you can see here. So I'm not entirely sure why this set has a different pattern of frog, why the frog was a different pattern in the first place. What's the purpose of having such a low hanging frog? I just don't know. But this is the frog that came with the set, and as you can see it's marked in accordance with the various other components of the set. It does appear to match up with this belt, the way the belt loop's been sewn in, so I just don't know. Anyone who has any further information on that, I'd be very interested to know. I've not been able to find anything regarding this, and as I say, all the other sets I've seen have the 1925 pattern bayonet frog. So that's the cartridge carriers, the back section of the belt and the bayonet frog. We'll move on now to have a look at the braces. I'm pretty sure the design of the braces for this set of equipment will be familiar to anybody who is somewhat familiar with British web equipment. These are of a pattern used with the 1919 pattern equipment, the 1925 pattern equipment and the 1937 pattern equipment. They use the Mills reduction woven method of necking down from 1 inch to 2 inches. Obviously the flared section is designed to go over the shoulder and spread the load a little bit more. They have a loop on the inside where they cross over, and these are crossed over in the way they came to me with the set. I've left them looped together like this. So one of the braces has a loop sewn on the inside face where they cross over in the back. It keeps them together in the small of the back. And then you have the stamps here of MECo 1927. And again, well, this one here isn't marked actually, sorry, I'm forgetting, but MECo 1927 on one of them. Sometimes MECo mark the brasses of equipment, but that's not the case in this instance. As you can see, they are plain, and the same at this end. But they basically follow the standard Mills Equipment Company form that would be used with various sets of interwar web equipment, and then which would also be used with the later 1937 pattern equipment as well. And obviously different ways of manufacturing these will be introduced during the course of the Second World War, but they're a standard bit of Mills equipment basically. They came up with this design and then stuck with it for various different patterns of equipment, including this one. So the only thing that really marks these out is the fact, well, one of them is dated 1927. So that's the braces from the equipment set. The next thing to have a look at here are the two components intended to carry the entrenching tool and the water bottle on the brace end of the equipment. This design allows you to carry both on one hip, hanging from the brace ends. The carrier attaches, the water bottle carrier attaches to the entrenching tool carrier with this section of webbing here, and then a buckle attached with a little shape to the bottom of the water bottle carrier there, as you can see. And then at the top here, the idea is you would first feed the brace end through the buckle on the entrenching tool carrier and then through the buckle on the water bottle carrier, and that's how you'd carry both on the hip. You can see that the water bottle carrier is designed to take the British enamel water bottle in its felt cover. This is basically the same as that you'd see used with 1937 pattern, apart from the buckle on the bottom. And then the entrenching tool carrier is designed to take the head in the main section there, and that has loops for the helve on the side. And this method of doing things was taken from the 1919 pattern rifle equipment, which again, there's a section on Khaki Web, a website I mentioned in part 1. If you've not looked at Khaki Web, I highly recommend going and having a look at it. It'll give you more details on these. I'll take the components out of these now and we'll have a look at both of them in a little bit more detail. So we'll have a look at the water bottle carrier in a little bit more detail here. If I lift this up here, it's a fairly standard skeleton type water bottle carrier. There's not much to differentiate it from 1937 pattern, apart from the buckle and shape on the bottom there, which allow it to be clipped on or attached onto the front of the entrenching tool carrier. You can see that there. Close at the top on the shoulder of the bottle with a Newey press stud, as you can see there. And it is also date stamped on the inside, on this side here, on the inner strap, MECo 1927, again, in line with the rest of the equipment. But nothing particularly remarkable about this design apart from the additional buckle on the bottom to allow it to attach onto the front of the entrenching tool carrier. And we'll have a more detailed look at the entrenching tool carrier now. You can see the short strap on the front here, which that buckle on the water bottle carrier attaches to. These are otherwise not held together apart from the fact that they're both attached to the same brace ends. Reinforced at the corners with rivets, as you can see. There is also a rivet holding in a metal reinforcement piece, I believe it is metal, in the bottom there, where the pick head of the entrenching tool head slots into the bottom. Obviously that's going to be a major point of wear, so you've got that reinforcing piece there. Simple loops of webbing sewn onto the side to allow you to fit the helve in there, and you can see that the buckles are just sewn on with these shapes here. And you can see the back face of the rivets there. This is marked inside, and you can see it has a heavy canvas lining material, and you can see that the stamp in there of MECo 1927 again. I'm able to shine the light down in here and possibly see that reinforcement piece in the bottom. If I open this right up, let's see, it might be within the lining material. Don't think we're going to be able to see down in there, unfortunately, but it's worth a try. So that's the entrenching tool carrier, again basically pilfered from the 1919 pattern web equipment. The final thing to have a look at here is the haversack, and this is basically per the 1925 pattern design. It's very simple. There are no fittings on the back, as you can see. It's purely designed to attach onto the brace ends using the buckles on each side. So you have a little chape and buckle on each side there, and this is purely designed to hang on the hip from the brace ends. Secured with two straps at the front in typical Mills fashion. Open these up here. You can see the stamp under the flap there. MECo 1927 again, as all these components are. You have small weather flaps on each side. Oh, that's the little letter that Ian included with the set when he sent it to me. Thank you again, Ian, for this. It really is nice to be able to talk about this on the channel. It's quite an interesting set of equipment, and it's very generous of you to send it over to me. You can see there, it's just an open bag. There's really nothing else to say about this. There's no dividers or anything, as you can see. It's about as simple as you can get in terms of making a webbing haversack. Just one thing to mention is, if we look at the side here, if I pull this tight, you can see the taper down to the bottom, so it's wider at the bottom than it is at the top. And that's an element of the design carried across from the 1925 pattern equipment. But again, a very, very simple design of haversack, designed only to be carried on the brace ends. There's no provision for carrying this on the back, really. So that's the haversack from the equipment set.
So I hope you found part 2 interesting. As I say, this is quite an interesting set of equipment in that it draws from 2 preceding designs, and was an example of the Mills Equipment Company trying to produce a commercial product, tailoring what they already had in terms of designs to the needs of a specific customer, and we can see that in the way that the different components from preceding equipment sets have been drawn together in this set. From that point of view, it's quite interesting. As said in part 1, if you'd like to read more about this, there's a bit more information on Khaki Web. There's a section, I think, in the 1925 pattern webbing section on there. Obviously I'll put a link down below again, as I did with part 1, if you'd like to read up a little bit more on this. And obviously it shows you the example of the frog there with the press stud to fix it in place on the belt, in contrast to the frog which arrived with this equipment. So obviously you'll be able to see that difference between the 2 designs over there. If you have found this interesting and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those 2 methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. Brief note on Patreon as well. I've started to upload the videos directly over there, so Patreon subscribers can watch them ad-free. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch, but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address in the description as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.